All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Chris Czarnecki. It's at the Joel Palmer House in Dayton. It's May 30th, 2024. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. We usually ask why wine to start, but today we're just going to ask, why are you in this place?
I literally grew up in the restaurant business. It wasn't until I was 3 years old that my parents actually bought a separate house. So the restaurant back in Pennsylvania had a second and even a third story, and that's where I lived for the first 3 years of my life. You know, imagine waking up in the middle of the night and smelling food from the downstairs has an impact on you. But hearing the hustle, the bustle, the sounds and everything, it was as early as the second grade that I would hang out in the bar with my grandmother who would mix cocktails. So at the old place, in a row, there was the kitchen, the bar, lobby, and then the dining room. And so I would watch servers go by all night long, looking at the food. I think it was the fourth grade when they started letting me help garnish desserts. I'll never forget the time I took like every ingredient from the dessert station to make one big, gorgeous, amazing dessert. And my dad takes a look at it. He's like, it's too busy. I was heartbroken. I was like, okay, maybe this isn't for me. But I was always really curious, and I liked hanging out with the staff in the kitchen. I liked being in the front of the house, talking to guests. And of course, when you're 10 years old wearing a suit and tie, you're going to make a little extra scratch, which, doesn't hurt either. But then it got to the point where, I could actually make some money doing this, which, as a 6th, 7th, 8th grader, a big draw. And so, I actually went away to boarding school for a couple of years for high school. I enjoyed it too much, so I came home and graduated public school, which was half a block away from my house. But during those 2 years, I worked at the restaurant a lot, It was great for my folks because I knew all the ins and outs and could pretty much jump into any station, except for, bartending, obviously. But it was just ingrained in me from a pretty early age. I remember helping with appetizers, helping to prep, making the sous chef chuckle because he would hand me a piece of raw steak, and I'd asked him, I was like, I can eat this? And he's like, yeah. So it popped in my mouth. He got a kick out of that. Hearing all the stories that no 12-year-old should be hearing in a kitchen, the horror stories, the drama, all the fun stuff. And this is, these are the days before Food Network, where everything's on the screen, right? And a lot of it's over-dramatized and hyped up. No, this was real, in-your-face, 130-degree, humid East Coast kitchen, that I grew up in. But, I loved it. But then fast forward to high school graduation, I was just in no mood to go to college, and my parents had bought this place. Basically, my grandfather had passed away in 1995, and so my folks finally, chased their dream of having a wine country restaurant. But instead of California, which had kind of become wine country Disneyland by that point, they discovered Oregon at the recommendation of a family friend, bought the place. I actually lived upstairs during the big renovation in 1996. And so here I was 19 years old, had to break up with my girlfriend of a year and a half, which was awful, to move out here, live upstairs with the bugs, no hot water, until, they closed on their house. So I worked at Radio Shack a few months, but that's when I landed at Lewis Audio Video, working for Dennis in Newburgh. And I loved it. I'm a tech nerd also. Lived in Southern California for a little while, and it was coming up on my 21st birthday that I was like, okay, I got to do something. Number one, I got to move out of the house. I can't be 21 years old living with my folks. And so at the time, Lewis Audio Video, Mitsubishi had this promotion where you'd earn points by selling their gear. And I was like, all right, round trip flight to Europe or 45-inch big screen TV? So luckily, I went the first option, and I went backpacking through Europe for a month. I landed in London, took the train down to Brighton, which was where the B&W speakers were being manufactured, so I got a factory tour, which Dennis thought was cool as hell. Took a ferry over to Lille, hopped on the train and just made it a point to hang out with as many other fellow backpackers as I could, eating all along the way. Now, granted, I did keep a bottle of Tabasco in my backpack just for emergency situations. But yeah, I had a 2-hour walking tour in Berlin that turned into 8 hours. It was amazing. Saw Checkpoint Charlie and heard all the stories from, before the wall came down, which, mind you, was only a few years prior. Then I went off to Warsaw to see my cousins and my aunt. Went to Prague, Czech Republic, had the best beer I've ever had in my entire life. Another walking tour. but I was the only one on it. So it was like this personalized tour. So crazy. There was this guy holding up a sign that said best walking tour in Prague. I was like, I'm gonna go with him. Totally not related at all, but like out of nowhere, all of a sudden there was like 50 people rioting. It was like some white supremacist bullshit. And then just as quickly, like 100 riot cops, and they were gone. So all through the tour, this guy's showing me these places. He's like, oh yeah, see those two guys over there? They're Secret Service. They still roll a lot like KGB. I was like, okay. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but that was one of the best meals. It was right off of the old town square they had. And it was like pork schnitzel and sauerkraut and this beer that was dark as Guinness, but light as a light beer. And so, like I said, I ate my way through Europe. I did stop at McDonald's once. I was getting a little homesick. Got to Switzerland, Austria, Italy, and then southern France. Took the TGV back up to London and flew home. So that was my whirlwind trip, but it kind of relit that culinary spark that I always had. So I like to refer to myself as a person who loves to eat. Cooking is, to me, is just a means to an end. You know, whenever anybody asks, oh, how do I get into the restaurant business? Or, oh, I'd really like to own my own restaurant someday. I'm like, no, you don't. You know, if you enjoy cooking, just stick with that. Because cooking and running a restaurant and being a chef are three entirely different things. You know, I wish I was still a chef. I hardly spend any time in the kitchen because it's admin, it's management, it's social media. And on top of that, I'm a dad now. So if I don't have to be here, I like to be home with my kids. You know, growing up with two parents both working in the restaurant, you don't spend a lot of time with them. You know, it's cool that we had breakfast and dinner every day and weekends, but you know, it's a different beast because for 3 generations prior, it was mom and pop shop. Now it's me and, well, my second family here. So those were my 20s, having fun, making bad decisions. Well, same thing. But I'd gotten myself into a mountain of credit card debt, $5,000. Who I know doesn't sound like anything, but it was a big deal for me at the time. So in an act of desperation, I joined the Army. So I signed up to be a cook, thinking that it would be easy. And tragically, I was right. I could do it with, you know, my eyes closed and hands tied behind my back. And that's how I got myself in trouble the first time, is because I was trying to make the hash browns taste good. Yes, I had to do push-ups in the kitchen because I was adding extra ingredients. So that was a bad job choice, but it was also a ton of exciting and horrible and, you know, disgusting experiences that I would absolutely do all over again. In 2004, I was deployed to Iraq, spent a year there. And it was actually home on leave that my parents said, hey, we're making our 5-10-year plan. Do you want to come join us in the business? So at the time, I was actually one signature away from doing the Green to Gold program, which means that they would have put me out of the Army, sent me to college for 4 years, and I'd come back in as an officer. So I promptly tore that up, finished off my enlistment, and I was stationed in Germany. That's a whole other fun story, which we have the time, I'll get into for a little bit. By sheer coincidence, I happen to have like a third cousin twice removed or something, who was a pastor in the same town in which the 1st Infantry Division, you know, was stationed. And I'll never forget the day I met him. So he's about 15, 20 years older than me. He's parked next to McDonald's, and I'm smelling French fries, or so I thought. No, he was running a biodiesel car before that was a thing. He would literally go and pick up oil from McDonald's and other places to fuel his car. And again, this is before you could get it at the pump. So he's wearing this like paisley black, I'll never forget, paisley shirt and leather pants. And I'm like, who the hell am I getting into a strange car with right now? But he was thinking the same thing, you know. He's like, okay, who's this American? Who's this soldier? You know, and we're just kind of sizing each other up. But after like 5-10 minutes of politics and religion and everything else in between, we became like super best friends. And so he took me out to all the best places to eat. I had as much German food as I could possibly get, which as a cook in the Army, believe it or not, we eat a lot, but not well. So it was great to be able to actually get out and taste real authentic German food. Not the food that they serve catering to foreigners, you know, and Americans in particular. But after that 3 years was over, I came home and started full-time here in 2006. I started working at the front of the house in the evenings. During the day, it was prepping in the kitchen. My folks would, you know, make something with me once, do it twice, third time, test it, make sure it was right. I don't think they handed me a single recipe card ever. It was all just put these things in it, bring it to me when you're done, and I'll make sure it's right. And so that's how I was pretty much self-taught. Well, that's the other reason I don't spend as much time in the kitchen either. I actually have some tremors, unfortunately. Don't get old, guys, it sucks.
Agreed.
So let's see, 2006, work in the front of the house. Well, that's how I force-fed myself the wine education. We had this great wine program. We had about 100 wines on the list at the time. I was like, all right, well, if I'm training to take this place over, I'd better start tasting. And so I would hit 3, 4, 5 wineries in a day. I think at the most I hit 8 wineries in one day. Just taste as much as I possibly could. And when wineries would come by with their wine to taste us, I'd be there for it. I'd be part of the process. And yeah, it was just very much a hands-on thing. And I was fortunate to be able to do it. It's an expensive hobby, if you're not in the industry. So it was great to be able to taste all these different wines. But then what occurred to me early on was that, a lot of people would bring in a special bottle, right? Usually it was older. And I was looking at our wine list, and we would raid the cellar once in a while. And I started developing this preference for wines with age on them. And so we'd buy a case of wine, we'd sell through the first 6, and then we'd put the rest away, or just raise the price so they wouldn't sell as quickly. And that's how I started building these verticals of wine on the list. And then, I'd be in the cellar one day and say, gosh, I remember buying that wine 3 years ago. I wonder what it's like now. And that's how the education just is very organic. I didn't take a single class, but when you're doing the thing day in, day out, you pick up a few things. And so the wine program's evolved over the last, this is 18 years now, in that, nowadays we can often buy older wines directly from the winemaker. On a couple rare occasions, customers of ours have said, hey, I'm trying to thin our collection. And we walk into their wine cellar, which is twice the size of mine, and I get to find some older bottles. Levi's done an amazing job of beefing it up with newer producers. Like I said, I don't spend as much time here as I used to. Dad now. So having him as a certified sommelier and chef, professionally trained chef, has been a really big help. So yeah, there's 46 years.
It's down quickly.
10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever that was.
So before we catch back up there, I have questions to follow up on. But let's go back a little bit. You mentioned a little bit before the interview about family restaurant history. So tell us about the original family restaurant and the generations before you.
Sure. So the original Joe's Restaurant was opened in 1916 by my great-grandfather, Joseph. He and his wife ran the place. It was a Polish, tavern, basically. They served Polish food. And one of the most common questions we get is, why the emphasis on wild mushrooms? Well, if you know anything about Polish cuisine, it's very heavy on wild mushrooms. Poland has been surrounded by enemies for the last few thousand years, so they got really good at cooking what they could hunt and forage. So when my grandparents took over Joe's back in the 1950s, they upscaled everything to be more in line with French fine dining. In fact, if you visit the restrooms, you'll see some of their menus from the 1950s. Filet mignon for $4. Yeah, and inflation is a real thing. But we still serve my grandfather's wild mushroom soup. My parents, they took over 1975, but instead of being a French-Polish fusion restaurant or steakhouse or French, they said, let's be a mushroom restaurant. That way we can pull ingredients and recipes from all over the world and circle it back to that one central theme. And with that, my dad got a ton of press. He was kind of a, B-list food celebrity chef before that was, ever really popular thing. And I remember being on the set with him of Good Morning America in New York City, eating at the best restaurants. The two types of people that get treated the best at fine dining restaurants, A, celebrities, obviously, but B, are other chefs. So it was awesome. He would roll in and, the chef would explode. Hey, Jack, it's so great to see you. Everybody else in the restaurant would be like, who is that? He's not famous. Who is that? And so that was intoxicating too, as a 14-year-old rolling in, especially in Manhattan, and other cities. It was a lot of fun. But they chased their dream of having a wine country restaurant, brought it here to Oregon in '97, and then they officially retired and sold it to me in 2008. The same year I got married. I wonder if that's a coincidence. But yeah, no, I've expanded the wine program quite a bit. We have over 600 different Oregon wines now. The oldest one on the list is 1994. The oldest bottle in the cellar is El Cove 1978. We don't have as many half bottles as I'd like, so wineries get on that, need more half bottles. But I know there's more expensive to produce, et cetera. We have some large format bottles. Oh, and the big 9-liter bottles that are downstairs, a couple of those aren't on the list. Those are for my son's weddings.
As you came back in, you mentioned obviously cooking in the Army not super enthralling for you. Is there anything that you've implemented from those days, anything you brought back from you when you took over the restaurant?
Well, a couple things, for sure. I mean, number one, the first week of culinary school in the Army is all about sanitation, food safety. It's one of those things, it's the less sexy part of the conversation that a lot of people don't think about. But, I almost never put my hands in my pockets. You know what I mean? If I touch my face, I instinctually go and wash my hands. Good habits, but also a good amount of discipline, understanding the importance of mise en place and doing things in a consistent, uniform way. Those were definitely solid lessons. When it comes to things like leadership, I literally just take all the lessons I applied in the Army and I do the opposite, and it seems to be working out pretty well. As far as dishes go, not so much. It was a bit of a change cooking for 1,000 people per meal to 50 overnight, but I definitely prefer this end of the spectrum. It's good to know I have that tool in my back pocket if it ever comes up again, though.
If the Army ever stops by.
You never know. It has happened once.
It has happened
We
once.
had a private party. It was about 24 people occupying these 2 rooms, and I come cruising through like I normally do, just to kind of put eyes on tables and catch the vibe, see how things are feeling. And as I'm exiting through there, I hear one guy starting to sing the Army song. I'm like, okay, he must have seen my combat patch, and now he's just fucking with me. Pardon my French. But I get to the kitchen door, and I hear this on the kitchen door. I'm like, okay, I open it up. This gray-haired gentleman, only about yay tall to me. He's like, what's that on your shoulder? I'm like, oh, well, sir, it's my combat patch. He's like, oh. Well, do you know who I am? I said, sorry, I don't. He's like, oh, my name's General so-and-so. I'm like, hey, it's an honor to meet you. Great having you here. Oh, so you must know General Batiste, 1st Infantry Division. I was like, yeah, let's see. He was my commander's commander. But yeah, I think I saw him once. He's like, he worked for me. Turns out in the restaurant that night, there were over 22 stars of retired military from every branch and a retired Secretary of Defense. They got drunk. But, that's a military thing. We have strong egos and livers.
That's amazing. You mentioned this was the restaurant was your parents' dream, the wine country restaurant. Do you know why? Why was that the ideal that they wanted to do for the second part of their restaurant life?
They didn't want to be in Manhattan or Philadelphia. I mean, Reading itself was deteriorating, and the restaurant was not in a nice part of town. They wanted, a certain degree of safety for one thing. They wanted to pursue their dream of opening a wine country restaurant almost as much as they wanted to get the heck out of the downtown area, and all the crime that goes with it. This is really what every chef wants, is to be independent, away from the downtown area, in a nice, cozy little place that they can call their own, And there are definitely days and seasons where, I'm lamenting how slow it can be, but on the other hand, it's nice to have the break.
So tell us a little bit about this building and the history of it.
Sure. Well, Joel Palmer is a historical figure in the state of Oregon. He had an unsuccessful run for governor. He was an Indian agent for a couple of years. He was actually really unpopular with the settlers because he felt strongly about relocating the Native Americans instead of killing them all. It was a pretty brutal time. I learned more about him a couple months ago. There's a gentleman who's actually having a book published all about Joel Palmer. So controversial, character, but he founded the town of Dayton. This was his home that he built for himself in 1852. It was a vacant residence for, 20, 30 years before my family bought it, and for good reason. I mean, every room had its own color shed carpeting. There was only one bathroom, and it was on the main floor. It was in rough shape. In fact, the whole foundation needed to get replaced. They literally jacked the building up, re-poured concrete, and set the house back down again. But yeah, about a year and a half later of renovations, they opened in '97. And I've actually been running the place longer than my parents did. It's weird to think. Like I said, don't get old, guys.
So tell me about from that initial kind of refoundation, starting from scratch. Tell me about the evolution of the building since you have owned it.
Sure. Well, the building right out here at the garage, was made to mirror the aesthetic of this building, but it in fact is not original. It was built in the 70s. It rubbed the ire of the Historic Society when they did that back then. We actually squeezed the building, if that makes sense. You'll notice that the overhang out there is where the old wall used to be. The purpose of that was to have more outdoor dining that was covered. Obviously when COVID hit, outdoor dining became a really big thing. So it was about, well, it was 2020 that we extended the patio, added about 30% to its size, and then added the tent that same year. Yeah, I'd like to do more outdoor dining, but it's just literally triples the walk for all the servers and everything, slows everything down. But business was good despite the pandemic, and that's why we did the indoor renovation. So 3 main renovations happened in 2002, all about the same time. The sexy part, of course, is the interior redesign, carpet, wallpaper, speakers, sound system, lighting, etc. But also half of the front deck needed to get replaced. There was a second-story bump out on the east side of the building that was literally rotting away. So that got replaced. Half the spindles on the railing out there had to get replaced. The garage needed a new roof, and so I just kind of bundled it all together into one loan. And a tremendous amount of support from our customers as well. Ran some gift certificate campaigns, and they came through in style.
So let's talk, before we talk about the wine list, some questions about that, but let's talk about the kind of the growth of the restaurant, the change in the restaurant. Obviously, it's been here for a long time. It's an institution in the area. It's known for mushrooms, known for wine. So tell me about what has changed in the time you've been here, the time you've owned it. How has it changed? How has it evolved? And I guess how has the restaurant industry evolved beside it?
Well, that's a good question. So it's a delicate balance staying on top of food trends, right? Because on one hand, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. There's a lot of history here. We're still serving my grandfather's soup, my mom's 3-mushroom tart, my dad's beef stroganoff. Those are permanent fixtures, and certain winemaker friends have threatened to boycott the restaurant if I ever take them off the menu. So, I like balancing on that knife's edge of, history, but also staying new and relevant. When I first started, of course, vegetarians were everywhere, but veganism was becoming really big. Also, celiac and gluten-free. Back then, when I first started, like 3/4 of the menu was 50% butter and cream, So I had to lighten things up. We use exclusively tamari now instead of soy sauce to accommodate the gluten-free people. So when it comes to dietary restrictions and safety, of course, got to stay on top of that. And also, molecular gastronomy became a big thing. Not sure how familiar you are with that, but incorporating a little bit of science in the kitchen, using different elements to restructure, certain dishes. I turned a bacon, lettuce, tomato burger into a consumable shot, for example. There's all sorts of fun, crazy things you can do, but I feel that a lot of restaurants have kind of pushed that too far, where things become completely unrecognizable. And one thing I discovered early on is that people want to be fed. They want the experience, sure, but at the end of the day, if it just looks pretty and it isn't delicious, probably not coming back. So the focus on taste, flavor has been at the top of my list and always will be. Doesn't mean we can't have fun, and we do. I like introducing little touches, little elements here and there of molecular gastronomy, but not letting it get out of hand. And then, well, other than sticking to the mushroom theme, my big thing is I like to cook what I like to eat. If I go out to a place and I'm like, oh, that's a really cool ingredient, I'll buy some, play with it, and we'll get it on the menu. I don't tend to make like seasonal changes to the menu. I'll just tweak things here and there and play with new things. Like the reason why we have sturgeon on the menu is because I went fishing at the mouth of the Columbia River, spent 40 minutes reeling in this dinosaur just to have to throw it back to find out it's too big, right? But I brought the one I could keep back to the restaurant and cooked it and hated it. Well, it's like, all right, I don't know what quite to do with this, and it's fish, it's not gonna last forever, so I threw a light marinade on it, stuck it back in the fridge, and forgot about it till the next day. I was like, oh, right, I gotta do something with this. All right, took another stab at it, cooked it exactly the same way, and it was tender and flaky. And that's when I realized, marinade, tenderize it, and that's when the magic happens. So happy accidents, but also, getting out and eating at other restaurants, find inspiration.
How have your customers changed or their expectations changed?
Well, for for the first 10 years, people would ask, "Oh, where's Jack?" You know, it took people quite a while to get used to the fact that they had retired officially in 2008. But I think they like the fact that we're sticking to tradition and mixing things up. You're not going to please everybody, unfortunately, but you got to stay true to who you are. If you try to please everybody, you're going to end up pleasing nobody. I don't know. Trends come and go, fads come and go, but like I said before, the things that really remain is food being delicious, with being nice to look at a very close second.
You mentioned earlier the pandemic. Tell me about the effects, sort of short-term, long-term effects that you noticed from 2020.
Well, the biggest challenge of the pandemic, at the beginning of, like, say, spring 2020, I was like, this is awesome. I get to spend, 3 months at home with my family. I'd like to lie and say that I spent time in the kitchen getting creative. No. I was helping my kindergartner, with his math on his Zoom school. But at the same time, I was worried about the fall. I knew that, people were probably going to want to eat out in the summertime. We've got the patio, that's great. It's like, what am I going to do in the fall when we're limited to 50% capacity, 25% capacity? So it was that year I made the decision to eliminate the three-course menu. So at the time, we were offering the three-course menu, appetizer, main course, dessert, and kind of the more deluxe Mushroom Madness tasting menu, which is about 5 courses. Well, I did away with the three-course, just offered the Madness, and added what I call the Oregon Omakase. So that's kind of my concept of, it's about 10 plus courses, but it's like going to a Japanese restaurant where you say, "Feed me, chef," and we'll just keep going until you're done. A couple times that challenge has been accepted, and we've pushed the limits of what our kitchen can put out 5 hours later. But it makes it a fun experience because it's smaller bites, more things. Because of the extended time frame, we get to have a lot more fun with, platings on things like dessert. Right now, we offer a tête de cuvée version where there's caviar on top of the sturgeon, there's foie gras on top of the duck. Instead of doing the 55-day in-house dry-aged prime New York, we get you actual authentic Kobe or Wagyu from Japan. And then the dessert board is just a work of art. It takes our pastry chef an hour to put it together, whether it's the individual sized portion or the big long board for larger parties. But there's something like 35 different elements on the plate. I can't even plate it. I don't even know what's all in there. I've never been a baker or a pastry chef, so Marcus is a total rock star. He takes care of that whole department.
So with a move like that towards that sort of dining, what was the inspiration for that? Why that particular route when it came time to change the menu that way?
Well, by upgrading the menu, I could also raise the price. If I was going to be limited in capacity, I had to get people to spend more money. And instead of just raising prices, I was like, well, let's give them something for that raise. Simultaneously, I've been to a number of Michelin star restaurants in the US and Europe, and I'll never forget a meal I had at a restaurant in California that shall go unnamed, where after 3 hours and $1,000, my wife and I were like, we're still hungry. And I don't ever want that to happen here. I'd rather risk overfeeding than underfeeding. And we've never been accused of being a diet restaurant, so the response has been really, really great.
So you mentioned wine earlier, obviously a focus before you took over, but obviously you've elevated that quite a bit since you've owned the place. So tell me about growing the wine list. What were the sort of the goals you had when it came time to grow the wine list, and what were the sort of the methods you've taken to do that?
I felt strongly about focusing our wine list on Oregon. Sommeliers, servers, people would come through all the time trying to get me to include California wine or old world wine, but I was like, no, we're in the Willamette Valley. We're surrounded by amazing wine. Let's focus on that. Not to mention, people come visit Oregon from all over the world to do what? Taste our wines. Why try to sell them a bottle of wine that they can get at any other restaurant, right? Instead, let's focus on those smaller producers whose wines are simply not available outside the state. The wine that we got in today, his total production is like 50 cases or 100 cases, and I think that's really fucking cool, Not only do we have wines from these smaller producers, but we've got multiple vintages of it. We can hold on to it, we can call them up, get some more. And so when people who are coming to taste Oregon wine say, hey, I was at Archery Summit today, I really loved their, Red Hills Estate. I say, great, which from the last 15 years would you like to try? not even the winery has a lot of these bottles anymore. And so whenever winemakers come by, I try to twist their arm, get them to sign some bottles, and just add to that experience. And our guests, wherever they're from in the world, when they get to try things that aren't available at any other restaurant in the world, it's a badge of honor. I think we have a champagne on the list. We have a dessert wine from France, but dessert wine, bubbles, all the things are from Oregon.
So tell me about your initial impressions of the Oregon wine industry and of starting to, I guess, get to know the people in the industry and get to know the wines you wanted to have here.
Well, it's like with the menu. I'm only going to put wines on the list that I like to drink. And that's not to say if you're not on the list, I don't like your wine. You've been downstairs. There's only so much room. We have capacity for about 2,500 bottles. But if I had 2,500 different wines on the list, that means I only have one bottle of each. That's not practical either. So the wine list ebbs and flows. I might carry a particular producer for a few years, we'll sell out, and other things will come in. And then they'll call me up and they say, hey, you want to taste some wine? I say, sure, come on in, we'll taste, I buy it. It's on the list for another few months or a couple of years until it sells out. It's just very organic that way. Levi's very much the same way in terms of the way he runs the wine program. We always taste ourselves, and if we like it, we buy it. That's simple. And the fun part is trying things after they've been down there for a while and seeing how they evolve with age. I mean, it's the craziest thing in the world where, God, this was a long time ago, but somebody pre-ordered a bottle of Beaufrere Vineyard 2002. He said he wanted it decanted at 3 o'clock so that he could start enjoying it for his 6 o'clock reservation. I was like, okay, this guy knows his Beaufrere. A week later, I opened the same bottle for a different guest, happened to be a friend of the family, and we all looked at each other like, is this flawed? What's wrong with it? It's not corked. Okay, I had a little secondary fermentation, but that'll blow off. And after an hour in glass, it was just something was wrong. Fine. I had 6 bottles left. I didn't even think about it. I didn't even have it on the list until like 5 years later. I was like, all right, it's about time I try this again. And it was gorgeous. So it's funny how, especially Oregon Pinot does this thing where it'll get better with time. I find that 5 to 10 years really seems to be ideal. But then there's certain producers who can make wines that last 20 years, 30. It's crazy and it's fun at the same time. Hard work, but somebody's got to do it.
How have you seen the wine industry grow as you've been here, and how do you sort of stay on top of new developments and new people on the scene?
Yeah, well, it really has exploded. We're up over, 800 wineries now?
Over 1,000?
Over 1,000, jeez, the time's flying by. Yeah. Well, for me, it used to be just drive around, see a sign, go in and taste. I know things are a lot more appointment-oriented these days, especially post-pandemic. Levi has been much better at making these new connections. I've had dad brain for the last 10, 12 years, and so I don't go out nearly as much. But again, it's always just been very authentic and organic. Very often we'll get an email or a phone call, say, hey, I'm from this place, can I taste you on some wines? Sometimes we buy, sometimes we don't. Mm-hmm. But like the delivery that we just took today, I hadn't heard of it before. And Levi's, well, you sent me his contact information. I was like, that was back in December. How am I supposed to remember that? Yeah.
Well, I asked the question earlier about on the sort of the food restaurant side. I'm curious on the wine side about preferences in your customers. Obviously, people know this is the place for Oregon Pinot Noir, Oregon wine in general. Have their tastes changed? Have their preferences changed? And how have you accommodated that?
Well, I couldn't say that I've noticed any particular trend in the market as a whole. But what I can tell you is what's always been fascinating for us is holding the hand and guiding somebody who's not familiar with Pinot Noir or Oregon Pinot in particular. Our sommelier team is fantastic about asking some probing questions. What style do you like? Do you like fuller body? Do you like a lot lighter body? Do you like old world, new world? And finding a bottle that suits their particular preference. If you like a big, bolder, steak-friendly Pinot, okay, we're going to direct you to somebody with lots of new oak, probably a hotter year, maybe the whole cluster, etc. You might get somebody that says, oh, I prefer lighter wines, I love to drink Burgundy. Okay, well then we're going to steer them over here. And it's been a lot of fun, exposing people to the incredible variety that Oregon offers. The word typicity is often used when it comes to specific regions, and it's hard to limit Oregon to just one typicity, especially when you start exploring the different AVAs.
So let's talk about the future a little bit. Let's talk about the wine industry first. As obviously you've seen a lot of changes, you mentioned the growth and all of that. As you look ahead for Oregon wine, what do you see coming down the road, say in the next decade? And how are you sort of preparing to sort of pair what you do here with that?
Well, I haven't come to any conclusion yet about the impact of the larger producers coming in and buying property and buying brands. I do feel like there's still very much a rising tides floats all ships mentality amongst the industry and amongst my fellow restaurateurs. So I couldn't tell you I've seen a negative impact, but it is driving up the traffic. One thing that's great about other restaurants and new vines being planted all over the place is that it is making it a lot less seasonal here. There are days in the wintertime where it's so slow. I'm just, see you guys, let's all just go home. We don't have any reservations for the night. And then in the summertime, we're booked every night. I've noticed since I started in 2006 that the slow season seems to be starting later and later. Now, busy season doesn't end till the end of December, but then January 1st, it's like somebody flipped a switch. So we need to get with the wineries and get their marketing teams active now so that in the wintertime, we're not all quite so slow.
The January wine month. Yeah.
Something like that.
For sure.
Pro tip, don't go out to eat on Valentine's. Everybody does that. Be smart, go out another day. You'll have a much more leisurely experience.
Well, we'll lead the interview with that, for sure. Tell me about the future here then. Obviously, you've mentioned some of the changes. What are you looking ahead to with regards to the restaurant, both physically building, menu, any changes you're looking ahead to?
Well, the menu's continuing to evolve. Once the loan for this renovation is paid for, the next project on my horizon is renovating the barn. So the barn that's on the other side of the parking lot is original. Unfortunately, has not had a single renovation done. Actually, I take that back. I think I saw some exposed wiring, but it's literally rotting and it needs to go. It's sad to say. So what I'd like to do is build a structure where the downstairs is a tasting room that I would lease to a winery that doesn't have a physical tasting room yet, and then have a couple of VRBOs upstairs so that we can do more weddings. We tend not to do weddings because, we have to shut down the restaurant for a whole day, and unless they have enough budget, it's just not worth it, right? So the idea is that by offering more amenities, we can do more weddings. And it's a lot easier to serve 150 people the same thing at the same time than 20 people, all different things at different times. So we do about one wedding a year. One of my Army buddies is flying out from New York to get married here in September. So
awesome.
Finally, after all these years. But no, that would be the next phase of our evolution is more special events and things like that. Levi's been trying to get me to do brunch forever, but he's also single. For now, ladies, snatch him up like you can. He's a rock star.
Turned into a dating profile so quickly here after. Got to get it back on track.
He's been with me for coming up on 4 years now. I love him like a brother.
Outside of sort of work and the restaurant, what else are you looking ahead to for your own future? Anything exciting in life outside of this?
Honestly, my number one mission is to be a good dad. I mentioned earlier that it was great to have breakfast and dinner with my parents, but it was really my grandparents that, taught me the tricks in the kitchen, helped me with my homework, took me to Little League, etc. So I just try to be at home with my boys as much as I possibly can. And I'd like to stay married as well.
Noble goals. All right. Well, I can't let this go without asking about Nicolas Cage. So let's talk about how you got to know Nicolas Cage and the influence for his movie.
Sure. So the writer and director reached out to us, would have been 2016, because he was writing the script for the movie. They came by, they asked us, by us I mean me, my dad, and my brother, about mushrooms, about truffles, truffle hunting, etc. We told him point blank, I was like, nobody truffle hunts with pigs anymore. Everybody uses dogs. He's like, I know, but it's a movie. The pig will be more fun. We're like, all right, cool, we'll roll with that. They would bounce us questions once in a while. We'd ask how things were going, and they'd say, okay, well, we might have this actor, we might have this actor. And then finally they said, oh, we signed to Nicolas Cage. And I'm like, cool. So I might get to meet him in 5 years or something. So I just literally put it in the back of my brain till one day I got this email saying, does this date work for him to spend a day in the kitchen, learning how to make this particular dish and learning how to move and act like a chef. So that's what we did. If I'll get you a copy of the DVD. I'm DVD famous now. I'm in the special features. They took about 4 hours of footage and shrunk it down to about 20 minutes. And then I got to spend the next day on set. So the scene where he's in the woods washing the pan, well, fun fact number one, that's my cast iron pan. It's in the kitchen right now. So yes, the pan got more screen time than I did. But I got to edit the set a little bit. You know, I noticed little things that a chef would never do, like the way the knives were hung on the knife rack, cleaned up a little bit. Yeah, he came in for dinner the next day with his wife and son, and he was a really cool dude. Fun fact also, everyone asks what's he like? And for the first year and a half after I met him, I had really no idea what to say. So I'd be like, I think he was jet lagged, or maybe he was grumpy from a bad flight. I just couldn't figure it out. It wasn't until after I saw the movie that I was like, oh, he was getting into character. So when you see him in the movie Pig, that's how he was when he first got here. Now he loosened up and became, just a normal dude when we were hanging out in the kitchen for a while. At first he was probably like, all right, is this guy gonna fanboy out on me or something? But no, I just treated him like another dude, and yeah, he was fun to work with.
What did you think of the movie when it came out?
I liked it a lot. I mean, no spoilers, but it's a bit of a downer, But he went on to say that it was his favorite film that he ever made. So I thought that was cool.
So with that, obviously you talked about the family history and foraging. Obviously that's been something that you've been known for and the family's been known for. Did it take on a second life after that? Did it kind of rejuvenate anything at that point, or has it just been?
Well, my dad always described himself as a mushroom hunter who likes to cook, and so he would go out for hours and hours and hours. He'd get up at dawn, head to the mountain, pick all day with his mushroom hunting buddies, the mushroom mafia as he called them. This team of retired school teachers. I'm not making this up, man. This is straight from the horse's mouth here. And yeah, I'd be here closing the restaurant at 10:30, 11 o'clock. They'd roll up in their caravan of Subarus and drop off dozens of baskets full of mushrooms. And I'd have to stay for the next 4 hours to get them all clean. Because if you don't, the bugs get to them and you lose half of them. So no, I don't go out mushroom hunting like he did. Again, dad mode most of the time. And again, it's just me. It's not a mom and pop shop anymore. So I go out when I can, but usually it's them running around the forest, me trying not to lose them, and we don't go out very often. But thankfully we still have our guys who do go out and get them for us. So the mushrooms, yeah, 9 out of 10 are from Oregon. I might buy from California once in a while, or Washington, but predominantly Oregon.
Last question for you. Greatest accomplishment. What are you proudest of at this point?
Oh, becoming a dad. After that, I don't know, hard to say. Having a great team, frankly. I think the Food Network does a good job of, the yelling and the screaming and the drama and all that crazy stuff. But truthfully, being surrounded by professionals who love what they do and love doing it with you, it's tough to beat that professionally. You treat people well, they'll take care of you too. I remember the very moment the light bulb went off over my head. Because if I was working behind the line, I'm blind back there. I can't see the guests' faces. I can't read the vibe of the dining room. So all night long, I'm like, how are the guests? How is everybody? Are they happy? Are they enjoying this? All night long. One day, I don't know if it was an accident or if I'll say I pre-planned it strategically. I started asking the servers, how are you doing? Is it getting too crazy out there? You in good shape? You staying hydrated? And everything changed. This was about like 8 years ago. So I realized in that moment that my number one job wasn't taking care of the guests, it was taking care of the team. And if I do everything I can to go out of my way to take care of them, well, that's the circle of life. They'll take care of the guests will pay their bills, and we're alive.
All right. All the questions that I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have, or anything we didn't cover that you'd like to cover today?
I don't think so. I'm sure I'll think of something as soon as we're done. For
sure. Well, we'll just have to come back. That'll be great.
All right. We'll have to come in for dinner.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time, your hospitality, sharing your stories with us. Couldn't let you off the hook.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.